Okay, so for those of you that have tuned in to learn about the R1 purchase, we're going to get to that. But real quick, I got to do a little bit of cleanup work with those that have been following my Marius series of his G1 tank build. We went through the game 1, and it ended kind of quick. What we didn't see is I did another video, a recording, I just can't find it, where I did follow up with UK. The US, I think it was US 3, it is already over, but UK, they whiffed 2 at the Japan fleet, and then he took Moscow pretty easily with Germany. So that game wrapped up, and there was nowhere going with that game, and so graciously Marius agreed to play a second game, and I recorded the first video and had like a great, real long talk about what I'm going to talk about in just a minute with the R1 buy and other stuff, and quoted some of the stuff Marius talked about after the game and I talked about, and it wasn't recording at all. And I posted the video, and several of y'all had already watched and saw that it was just a video with no sound. So I took it down and I'm redoing it, and basically what I spent a lot of the time talking about was R1 buy. What does it mean now? And so that's what we're going to approach on this. And then real quickly, I'll just show what happened in our game 2 R1 of the dice battle, because that's always the fun part, what happens in West Russia and Ukraine. So I'll show that little clip of the video and save you from watching a soundless video for 45 minutes. So we're going to talk about R1 because this is relevant to this move that I take with Marius. And I did forget to say also, I plan on doing a summary video after these couple games with Marius and really talk about everything I've learned in that video. So stay tuned for that when the game 2 ends. But R1, here we go. So the classic, in the very beginning when things came out, it was 4 infantry, 3 artillery. That was the build, way back in like Season 1 and pre-Season 1, if you will. But it didn't take long that Germany started stacking Karelia and R1, and so people matriculated, whatever the word is, and got to the 4 infantry, 2 tank build. And that's kind of the meta, and that's been the meta for a long time now, because it allows you to put pressure on Karelia with 2 tanks being built in Moscow, as well as it prevents a Ukraine stack. If there's not as good dice there, you got 2 tanks going in there. So there's double whammy benefit from the tanks. So that's been the meta for a very long time. One of the interesting things that's come up, and I gotta give credit to where I've learned it from, was with Percival Haddock on Discord, brought it up, and he's been playing for quite some time now a build of 3 artillery and 2 tanks. And it's an interesting concept. The scary part is, again, we've gone from 8 infantry, 8 units, to 4 infantry, 3 artillery, 7 units, to 4 infantry, 2 artillery, to 6 units, to 3 artillery, 2 tanks, of 5 units that we're starting with Russia. And you'd think that would be making things worse when you're facing a very fast, aggressive Germany. Well, we're going to really dig into these 3 builds in particular and talk a little bit more about them in detail and compare. And I'm going to use the 4-2 as the kind of the gold standard, if you will, because it is generally the accepted gold standard out there right now. And we're going to see how these other builds compare to it, because what I did in this game in round 2 is I actually went with a 4-3. I said, we're going retro. The fact is, and I did my math and calculating, not what I'm going to present in the video today, but I just sat there and looked at the frustrating of game 1 was Germany 2 moving into Caucasus boldly and flying those Japan fighters in. And so my thing is, if I'm going to go into a KJF, and by R2 I know if I'm doing a KJF or KGF. KJF, I'm much more sketchy about doing the strafe on Ukraine on R2 when Germany's got this big build with the tank build. Because really, I feel like I need to get a 1.3 unit per 1 unit I lose. I need to kill 1.3 units of Germany. Now, there's a lot more that goes into it, and that's just talking pure defense strength versus attack strength, and Germany's the attacking unit and getting down to the Moscow battle. I'm not going into that in this video. Sorry, Aardvark Pepper. I know you're going, come on. There's more to it than that. There's positioning, there's timing, there's all sorts of stuff. We're not going into that in this video. We're sticking with just the bare basics. So the point was, I was looking at how can I maximize pressure on Caucasus if I stack West Russia for R3, well, UK2, because Germany moves into Caucasus, a UK2 plus R3 play that will put the most pressure there and hopefully keep Germany from going into Caucasus. And so the 4 infantry, 3 artillery, followed by a 7 artillery build in R2, gave me, in my mind, the most pressure here. But the thing of it is that trades off the Karelia, right? And so now I'm saying, well, go ahead and stack G1. But, I found myself, and this is the conversation I'm openly still going through, is I find myself when I've got my 6 infantry, we're just saying 6 infantry survived West Russia, kind of the average, 5 to 6 is average. But when 6 infantry survive, and I'm building those 2 tanks, I still found German players going in and stacking Karelia 1. Even though I have them slightly dead zone, we're threatening, but it's very, it's a toss-up battle still. And I find myself so frequently choosing not to take that battle. I got burnt one time, and even retreating wasn't really an option, that I've been hesitant to take the battle. So that made me think, do I need to build those 2 tanks if I'm going to threaten but not follow it? Do I need to build those 2 tanks? So let's go back to 3 artillery. So in this game, you're going to see I did the 3 artillery build, but since this game has gone on and this has just been weighing in the back of my mind, I decided I really wanted to crunch the numbers on this. So we're going to look at this R1 build, and I do need to show one thing unique to the 3 artillery 2 tank build. Because it'll become relevant in the stuff I'm going to talk about as well. And this is I fast forward to R2 after doing a 3 artillery 2 tank build. I did the German turn. I just simulated real fast through UK, US, and Japan, so don't pay attention to where those units are. One thing I will say is if you're facing a German tank build, you do need to get this UK infantry up, because you're going to need to be watching out for the tank blitz with a whole bunch of Japan Air flying in on J2. So they could tank blitz and hit your 3 guys that you're coming back to help, that you're counting on that infantry to help with the dead zone, and these guys that come help with defense, and they'll just get blasted away by a J tank blitzing through Sichuan. So you need the UK1 to come here, so UK2, he can go here and block the tank flying through. So that's all that comment. Back to the R2. So we get to the R2 level here, and you remember I said with the 4 infantry 3 artillery, I'm going to build 7 artillery in the second round. Well, and that gives me the most, that increases my highest attack power, attack strength. Now I'm assuming with this whole talk, R took Ukraine and got 28 IPC. There's always the hit and retreat. We're not going down that road. It's more common that R takes it, gets a 28 IPC. So we're talking about a 28 IPC build. So you can see right here, 28 IPC sitting here. And so normally, like I said, when I'm facing this G tank rush, I'm like, all right, let's dump up, let's get as much attack strength as we can. Let's buy 7 artillery. But in this scenario, you'll notice after we take our turn, these 2 infantry will come up, so they'll be relevant. This guy's going to come up, he's going to be relevant. This guy's too far away to threaten Caucasus. This guy's going to step up, he'll be relevant. So threatening Caucasus, if I build 7 artillery, I'm going to have 1, 7, 8, 9, 10 infantry. Well, I've already got 5 artillery, so 5 artillery build matches it. So I've got now 10 infantry, 10 artillery. So these other 2 artilleries I'm building is really, they're not pairing with an infantry. So I would need to have an infantry to make it, worth the buy. So really the buy would look more like this: 1 infantry, 6 artillery. If we are not strafing Ukraine. Store that in the back of your mind. That'll come up later. But we're saying we're not strafing Ukraine on R2. We're trying to dead zone. We're trying to stay stacked in West Russia and dead zone Caucasus. So it was important for me to show you this because this is gonna come into play later in the conversation. But for now, it's time for a PowerPoint. And we're going all the way back to the R1 purchase. So again, we said the meta right now is 4 infantry, 2 tanks. What is that? That is an equivalent of 10 attack power, 4 for the infantry, 3 for each tank, 10 attack power. Those that follow me, I'd like to use attack strength. I'm not going to go into explaining what exactly that is. It just takes into account the unit count as well, because having more units in the battle, if you've got a 20 attack power with 5 units attacking, that's worse than if you have a 20 attack power and you have 10 units attacking, because you absorb hits more that way. So my attack strength just takes into unit count as well. So a higher unit count, higher attack strength for an equal attack power. So 4 infantry, 2 tanks, attack power 10, attack strength 22. So 4 infantry, 30 artillery, we're bringing that in. So now our attack power is 13. Heads up, I count artillery as a 3 in attack power because I'm always making sure an artillery is matching an infantry. So it's going to be a 2 for the artillery, plus it's adding 1 to the infantry. So I always count my artillery as 3 attack power. I don't believe the game does. The game counts it as 2. So that's why that's 9 and 4 attack power of 13. That brings an attack strength, my calculation, up to a 27. So what about this new build? 3 artillery and 2 tanks. Well, that gives us an attack power of 15, the highest of the attack powers, but an attack strength of 25. A little bit less than the 4 infantry, 3 artillery, but more than the 4 infantry, 2 tanks. But the big key here is there is 2 tanks, so now we've got our Karelia pressure going on still. So we can still have pressure on Karelia here where we gave that up here. Let's take a little closer look at that R2 Ukraine strength number. So gold standard, 4 infantry, 2 tanks. We put 4 infantry in Ukraine, 2 tanks in Moscow. This is the added attack power, attack strength that buy brings in to the strafe on Ukraine on R2 if we choose to do it. Next up was our 4 infantry, 3 artillery, but for talking about the Ukraine strafe, it's really 1 infantry and 3 artillery, because 3 of those infantry have to be built in Moscow, and they cannot attack Ukraine on round 2. So it's really 1 infantry and 3 artillery, so really we're adding 10 attack power and 18 attack strength to the R2. And so this is actually weaker on R2 Ukraine strength than the meta of 4 infantry and 2 tanks. Which we kind of knew this, because that's what we talked about. Those 2 tanks can get to Ukraine as well. So what does that mean for the 3 artillery, 2 tanks? Well, 3 artillery, 2 tanks. 3 artillery can go into Caucasus, plus a tank, and then a tank in Moscow. So all of these can hit Ukraine on round 2. So that gives us an attack power of 15 and attack strength. So this is both the highest attack power and the highest attack strength for our Ukraine strafe. So if you are someone who is considering strafing Ukraine on R2, this gives you your highest strength and attack power in doing so. Now, sometimes that could be a bad thing, because you may win Ukraine and then you're stuck in it. But that's a whole other conversation for a different video. So right now, that starts to bring in some questions to my mind of, okay, what are we really wanting on R1? So let's look at the round 3 Caucasus dead zone without a Ukraine strafe, because I said if I'm going into KJF, I'm trying not to strafe. A lot happens in round 1. That changes whether you're going to strafe or not strafe. So, with the 4 infantry, 2 tank build, we already covered the best buy for dead zoning Caucasus. After that is going to be 7 artillery, because all those artillery match up with infantry, and they can create the biggest dead zone for 28 IPC on Caucasus. And so that gives us a total of our R1 purchase and our R2 purchase. So our 4 infantry, 2 tanks, and 7 artillery, a total attack power of 31, attack strength of 57. Our 4 infantry, 3 artillery, we still have room for 7 artillery to be built and matched with infantry, so that is still our best buy. So our R1, R2 is going to be 4 infantry, 7 artillery. Now, you notice I'm not including everything else on the board because we're assuming, our R1 Russia is going to be the same no matter what. And we're just assuming that it's the average 6 infantry. When we're buying our R1, we don't know what it's going to do anyway, so it doesn't, we're making the purchase before we know what happens in West Russia. So in any case, our R2 buy, 7 artillery is going to be our best buy. So that gives us an attack power of 34 and an attack strength of 62 going into Caucasus on R3. What about the 3 artillery, 2 tanks? Well, like I said, we can't really, building 7 artillery is now inefficient because we don't have an artillery to match to every infantry. So really it's 1 infantry, 6 artillery, plus the 3 artillery, plus 2 tanks. That is our best buy. Those 6 artillery do match up now with this infantry and the other infantry around. And so that gives us an attack power of 34, but an attack strength of 58. So you notice the attack power is the same if we're just looking at true AP, but the attack strength is weaker in R3 and dead zoning Caucasus when we did not strafe. So let that sink in for a second. So this is what I thought about. I was solely thinking about this when I was making my buy, and why I chose to go back to 4 infantry, 3 artillery, because of this number right here, and the fact that and now people are going to go ahead and throw that G1 stack on me when I have 6 infantry and 2 tanks built, but I tend to wuss out on that battle, especially if I'm playing an opponent that I feel like I have a better opportunity of winning. If I'm playing someone more equal, I'm probably going to take that battle, though, because you can't give that up. Against a weak player that I perceive as being weaker than me, I'm more likely to let it go and hope that I can make it up somewhere else. So, the thing that I'm going to talk about, let's bring up the final slide here. Summary time, Excel time, woohoo! For those that know me and my Excels, I had to get an Excel sheet in here somewhere or another. So here we go. R1 purchases. Here's our 3 R1 purchases. Again, I blacked out. Oh, shoot. Go back. Come on. Back to the slide. All right. Don't click the mouse. Like I said, this is our gold standard. So we're basing everything off of this being the gold standard. So that's why I blacked it out. We're comparing the different purchases and what it means on an R2 attack versus Karelia, because that's important. We're looking at what it means versus an R2 strafe at Ukraine, because that's important. And we're looking at what it means versus a R3 attack versus Caucasus without a strafe and then with a strafe. So reviewing the 3 artillery buy, we lose the attack strength on Karelia. 3 artillery, 2 tanks, it's the same thing. It's 2 tanks going there. R2 strafe of Ukraine, the 4 infantry, 3 artillery, because only one of those infantry actually are involved, we actually lose attack strength against the strafe, whereas the 3 artillery, 2 tank has a positive, improved attack strength versus 4 infantry, 2 tank in the strafe. And the dead zone without a strafe, that is where the 4 infantry, 3 artillery has its shining moment of the most improved attack strength, but 3 artillery, 2 tank is better than the 4 infantry, 2 tank in that case. Then we come to the R3 attack versus Caucasus strafe, and this gets a little bit harder to exactly measure because we're starting to get into lots of variables that have happened now. And it depends on how that strafe went. Did you go 1 round? Did you go 2 round? Did you actually win it? So it really starts to be a little bit questionable. I put a negative question mark on the 4-inch 3 artillery and a positive question mark on the 3 artillery 2 tank simply because if we did the strafe, we had more attack strength and less attack strength in the strafe. So theoretically, if we went multiple rounds, we got less hits, which means they had more defense hitting back versus us. Or this, we got more hits and they had less defense hitting back, so potentially we'd have more survivors and less survivors because of this balance here. So theoretically, it's somewhere in there, but I can't put an actual number on it per se. It's probably negligible. Most likely, in the R2 buy really doesn't play a matter now because if we strafe an R2, we're probably going to strafe all the way through our infantry into our artillery units. And so we're most likely with that 28 IPC in all 3 cases building 4 infantry, 4 artillery to maximize our attack power, attack strength in it. So the buy is probably all of them, 4 infantry, 4 artillery, so it doesn't really matter. It's only the R1 buy and what impact it has. So this is probably negligible in all 3, to be honest. So 3 artillery 2 tank isn't looking too bad. It saves us in Karelia. It gives us a more powerful strafe. It's better than the meta, even without strafing on the Caucasus Dead Zone, although it is a little bit weaker there. And with the strafe, it's probably going to pay out. So it's all equal or slightly better than the 4 infantry 2 tank build. So just something to think about. And with that, we're going to jump into... Let's see if I can pull this up. So here's the actual game 2, cutting through all the time of blank, nothing here, and we'll just cut right to the good old dice rolls. See if I can simulate my thoughts at the time. I don't remember, to be honest. Erg. Okay, all right. I really want to get at least 3 hits in the round 1. Prefer 4 hits, of course. Oof. Ugh. I don't know if those are the sounds I made, but this is what came out of me now. We're already behind. We're already at 6 infantry, and he's got 3. Oh. Whew. All right. Breathe. We got 3 hits. So, all right. So we ended up 1 less than where we were before. 5 infantry. Not horrible, but worse than we were in game 1. And, that's all that really applies there. The rest of it's going to be your normal R1 type stuff, right? So again, I apologize that I did not have the... actual video working when I did it, but hopefully this was a good lesson in R1 type of buy and maybe make you question what is the best R1 buy.